Hello, my name is Kristen Page and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders at the University of Kentucky. And today I wanted to discuss the brain and communication. This video is intended for individuals with aphasia and caregivers. So how we express thoughts, how we understand friends, family, and healthcare providers, that's communication. So there are multiple ways to communicate. You can gesture by pointing, you can write, you can talk, you can text, read, understand or listen to others, and you can also use pictures. We use pictures a lot on our phones. So there are different parts of your brain that are responsible for communication. So I'm going to wear this hat to help demonstrate that. So we have two halves of our brain. We have a right half and a left half. These are called hemispheres. So each hemisphere has different general functions. So the right hemisphere is your creative side. It's associated with music, with understanding where we are in space, and also for that holistic view, so the big picture of items. And then you have your left hemisphere. This is your language dominant hemisphere. It's also associated with speech and with details, so specific details. So always explain the difference between the left and the right hemisphere like you're going on a trip, okay? The left hemisphere is worried about each little detail, while the right hemisphere is just excited about going and exploring, so the big picture. All right. Also, the right hemisphere controls the left side of your body, and the left hemisphere controls the right side of your body. So if one side of your body is weak, like raising your arm or walking with your leg, then we can tell which hemisphere was likely impaired. Okay. Then within each hemisphere, you have four lobes. So you have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, you have the occipital lobe, and you also have the temporal lobe. Each of these lobes also have different functions. We're going to talk about the lobes in the left hemisphere, the left side of your brain, because this is your language dominant hemisphere. Okay, so in the frontal lobe of your left hemisphere, this is associated with movement. It's also related to cognition, our ability to think and process information. It helps us with judgment, making good decisions, inhibiting or stopping an action or what we say if it's not appropriate, initiating, planning, organizing tasks, switching tasks, or just continuing on with the task. The frontal lobe also houses your premotor cortex, so this is your movement, your motor planning and execution. It tells us, okay, what muscles do I need to say a certain word? It also says what muscles do I need to perform a certain action, whether that's raising your hand or walking. The frontal lobe houses Broca's area. So Broca's area transfers word meaning into production or speech areas. So it lets us know, okay, what a word means, and then it takes it to the speech production areas. Okay, so that's your frontal lobe. Think of movement, speech, and judgment, decision making. Then we have the parietal lobe. So this lobe is associated with sensations, sensory information. It tells the frontal lobe what's going on. So what we feel, what we taste, what we see, it interprets that and sends it to the frontal lobe to respond. So the parietal lobe helps create an image of what we say. So if we say cat, then we visualize cat, a furry animal. It also informs the frontal lobe about the accuracy of our speech production. So we can feel the sounds that we produce. So we feel the difference between producing the word cat and producing the word calf. And that's because with cat, our tongue and our teeth move differently as it does with calf. So we can determine whether it's accurate or not. Okay, then the angular gyrus, this is associated with reading, with understanding the meaning of words, memory of events, and also numbers. So that's in your parietal lobe. So the parietal lobe, sensation, reading, and accuracy of speech production. And then the frontal lobe, we talked about how it's important for movement, for speech, and also for decision making and judgment. Okay, then the occipital lobe, the back, this is for vision. And then we have the temporal lobe. So the temporal lobe is activated with memory, word finding. So finding words, you know, you have words on the tip of your tongue. That's when the temporal lobe is activated. Comprehension, so understanding what you read and what others say, and as well as hearing. So I only discussed some of the functions of the brain. You can actually get in deeper in the brain, and there's more functions associated with each area of the brain. But we need the whole brain to communicate. Brain damage can cause communication difficulty. There are multiple forms of brain injury. Brain damage may occur from a stroke, which is the most common cause of aphasia. So a stroke is related to reduced blood flow to the brain. If you don't have blood to the brain doesn't have oxygen. Without oxygen, we have reduced or no function. So there's two types of strokes. There's an ischemic stroke, which means a clot has formed and it stopped blood flow. So I think of this as a water hose. When you put a kink in the water hose, it stops the flow of the water. So that's an ischemic stroke. Okay. The second type of stroke is a hemorrhagic stroke. This is when a blood vessel bursts and blood touches several areas of the brain. So when I think of a hemorrhagic stroke, I think of a pot that's boiling over. So you're cooking and a pot is boiling over with water. Well, that water gets on the stove and it gets really messy. Well, that's what happens with a hemorrhagic stroke. Blood goes on the brain, different parts it's not supposed to go, and gets it all messy and reduces the function. Okay. Another type of brain injury is a traumatic brain injury. So a traumatic brain injury is an injury to the brain caused by a force or a jolt. So it could be a car accident, a concussion, a gunshot wound, or a fall. So in the images you see there a brain scan from a gunshot wound, and that shows the direction of the bullet and how it's going through different parts of your brain, and it will impact the functions of the parts that it touches. Then you have, in the other image, I show whiplash. So this may occur from a motor vehicle accident, from a fall, or a concussion. So your head moves forward and it moves back really, really fast. And it's going to jolt those brain structures and cause some communication challenges. All right, so now we're going to discuss some, not all, of the steps associated with speaking, writing or texting, listening, and reading. So why do I have trouble speaking? Well, speaking involves, I included 7 steps, but I know there's more. So you think of the message, then is the message appropriate for this listener? The third step is you start speaking. You need to find the words and sounds to speak. You need to find and coordinate the muscles for those sounds within the words. Then you need to remember the words or the sounds you want to say. And then finally, you can speak. So this involves the frontal lobe, This involves the parietal lobe, and this involves structures in the temporal lobe. So it's a whole brain activity. Okay. Then the next communication we'll talk about is writing or texting. So why do I have trouble writing or texting? So I included 6 steps, but once again, this could be many more. So you have to think of what you want to write. You have to determine the words and the sounds. You have to place the words in order, in the correct order. You have to remember what you want to write and how to form the letters. Then you have to use your hand to write. And then you look at what you've written. So this involves the frontal lobe. It involves the temporal lobe. It involves the occipital lobe for vision. And also the parietal lobe for the sensation of writing. So it involves all of your brain, once again, for writing or texting. Okay? Then why do I have trouble listening or understanding others? Well, I included 5 steps here. So you have to pay attention to the speaker. You have to remember what they say. You have to hear the words. You have to comprehend the words and their meaning. You have to watch their mouth or their hand movements. So this involves the frontal and temporal and occipital lobes. So once again, it's a whole brain activity. Okay, why do I have trouble reading? Well, reading involves seeing the words, paying attention, determining the meaning of words or numbers, and remembering what you read. So it involves the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, so we talked about the angular gyrus for reading. It involves the occipital lobe for your vision, and the temporal lobe for memory. So hopefully this provided a clear understanding of how the brain injury impacts communication. So your ability to speak, your ability to write, to understand others, and to read. But therapy aims to strengthen the brain areas or find other areas, neurological areas, to perform functions of those damaged areas. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you.